Welcome everybody to Team Basics for the High Performance Leadership and Team Development Group on LinkedIn. Thanks very much for being here. This is the 5th webinar this week. Getting a start on sharing Team Basics with folks in the group. So I'm glad you're here. Just a quick note, we'll be using the chat function of Zoom webinars. So located on the bottom bar, if you move your mouse down there, the bottom bar will pop up. And you can see the chat in there. And we want to use those to for you to put some answers to questions that we'll pose throughout the webinar in those spots. So without any hesitation, make sure my technology works and we'll get started. So for today, the agenda for the webinar today is we'll review this. We'll do a quick introduction of me. We'll talk about the High Performance Leadership and Team Development Group quickly. We'll go over the aims of the webinar, why teams are important, the types of teams that exist, and how those teams can move up the performance curve. We'll also talk about what's next after this webinar. So who am I? So I am a developer of people. I'm also a coach. So when I think of developer of people, the thing that I want to do here is help people develop their potential, right? And specifically here, we're talking about teams. So in all of my roles as a leader, one of the things that I did consistently was develop the people on my team. So they may be in roles to start with, but as they learn more and their skills develop, we either created new roles for them or we continued to develop them in the existing roles so that they could feel that they were always adding skills and adding more to who they were and the job that they did. And consequently, sorry, as we did that, they were able to take on more responsibility. So that's always been my modus operandi, is developing people. So I'm also a coach. In my roles in corporate life, I was a manager, director, and VP at some point. I started out as a chemical engineer. So that's a long time ago, and worked in 3 countries as a chemical engineer: Canada, the UK, and the US. So that was a really interesting time of my life. So I had an athlete down here. And I put triathlete down here. Not that I'm trying to be an athlete, but that hopefully this year I get back to being a triathlete, swim, bike, and run. And we'll just see how that goes. The aim is to do 1 short course triathlon this week so I can actually make that real and take away the brackets. Husband, father of 2 teenagers, one almost 16 and one almost 18. So it's a busy life. Friend to many. So this group, this High Performance Leadership and Team Development Group, is now over 1,000 people. So thank you for being part of the group, and thank you for being part of that 1,000+ members of this group. It's grown beyond my expectations, and I'm really happy that everyone is here. So the aim of creating the group was to build a community to learn and share about team development. And really it's about team development on purpose. I think in the past, teams have developed out of happenstance, but what we really want to do today is to be able to purposely put the things in place and build the facets of a team that will allow it to form purposely and help an organization out. And so that's part of what the group's about, and also to share know-how. So there will be people, developers and coaches like myself who've done this with their clients. There'll be people in the group who are leaders who've done it themselves. So, and then there'll be people who want to learn how to do it. So I'm hoping that we're able to share that knowledge throughout the group on an ongoing basis. So the aims of this webinar. And before I get started, I just want to let everybody know that I have someone helping me today, my producer, Alyssa, and I'll just break for a second to give Alyssa a chance to say hello.
Hello.
Thanks, Alyssa. Thanks for being here and thanks for helping out. So the aims of this webinar are to kick off discussions on real teams. So when we get into the team performance curve, you'll see what I mean and why I've got real teams in parentheses, because not all teams are real teams. So I also want to create a shared understanding of team basics. So as we get into really talking about in future months and future webinars, high performance teams and what team leadership looks like, we need to have an understanding of team basics and where the teams that we're talking about actually sit on that performance curve. So that's one of the aims today. And then we'll discuss the team basics and how they show up for us in real life. So first question for you guys to use the chat for is to answer the question how you would define a team. So just take a quick sec and put a few words in the chat that explain how you think of a team.
Okay, so Leah has said collaboration, support, and constructive conflict.
I like that, especially the last piece, the constructive conflict. Okay. So what does a real team deliver? So when we're to the point where we've built a team and it's moved up the performance curve and it becomes a real team, what does it deliver? So a real team delivers performance. And it delivers performance in a culture that expects performance. So some organizational cultures aren't performance-based and things can be good enough. But where we're in an organization where the culture exists around performance, teams are the thing to go to, and teams' biggest delivery is performance, right? In real teams. So in delivering performance, real teams are able to deliver challenges and results that are big. And sometimes the organization has tried to deliver these same results or address the same challenge without a team in place to handle it, a real team, and have not made it. So a team is able to deliver those bigger challenges and results. They also have an influence on groups outside of the team. So let's say that this team existed inside of a large department, say 20 people. Teams are relatively small. So that smaller team, and we'll get to that later, but that smaller team has the ability to influence the rest of the department. And then that department being influenced by a team has the possibility and the potential to influence the rest of the organization. So the influence of teams spreads outside of itself. As teams develop and as team members grow inside that team, as they address those challenges and get those results, they have the ability to develop new skills and new capabilities. And that's one of the benefits for the members of the team, is that they're able to level up those capabilities and skills. Also, being part of a real team really lends itself to adding a higher degree of connection, meaning, and achievement to work. So when you come to work, you're not coming to work for something to do, but you're coming to work to get something done with a specific set of people, right? Those people on the team. And effort above and beyond. So teams, by their very nature, expend effort above and beyond what might be expected and what might have been seen in the past with people trying to adjust this challenge. And what's really cool about teams is that while expending that effort to go above and beyond, they tend to have fun. And if you get all the way to a high-performing team, they tend to have even more fun than the real team. And that's because of the structure and the camaraderie and how they're working together. So that's really cool. And I see that Laurel has raised a hand. Let's see, Laurel, go ahead and put your question in the chat, and we'll get Alyssa to read it out.
Right before I read out Laurel's, Mark just answered a question, the question from before. He said, buy in towards a well-understood goal or result with mutual respect for feedback and course corrections to meet the goal.
Yeah, so can you read that again for me one more time?
Buy in towards a well-understood goal or result with mutual respect for feedback and course corrections to meet the goal.
Yeah, so that well-defined goal, the idea of course correcting, a number of the cases that I've read about real teams, one of the defining things that they do is they continually look back on what they're doing and refine their approach and change things up so that the team and the team's processes continue to grow as they go towards those well-defined goals. Was there something in there from Laurel, Alyssa?
Not yet. I'm sure she's just still typing her question.
All right, let me know when it comes through. So when we look at the team performance curve, there are also a bunch of other models that relate to team performance. And I wanted to bring a couple of them in throughout this webinar just to show how other models kind of intersect with what we're talking about today. So this is the 5 cohesive behaviors of a team. So some of you may have read the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. And in that, Patrick Lencioni talks about the absence of trust, the inability to have conflict, the lack of commitment, accountability, and lack of results. But at the basis of this is trust. So if you turn the 5 dysfunctions kind of on their head, if you can replace those deficiencies, they become the 5 cohesive behaviors of a team. And at the base is trust. And so that is one of the most important parts of building a team. And we'll see why that's important a little bit later. But there are also other groups and other experts who talk about trust as the basis for forming a team. And so I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, Google had put together and done some research on what is necessary to build a team. And their big thing was psychological safety. And so that's maybe a step earlier than trust, because without psychological safety, what they found is people weren't able to build that trust and teams weren't able to form. So with creating psychological safety, the teams and the leaders and the members are able to build trust, which is then the basis for them to be able to build teams. So in Lencioni's model, one of the things that just kind of irks me a bit, and I call it a shortfall here, but real teams come together and are driven by a performance need. In Lencioni's model, results are at the top and they come notionally after all these things. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg situation, but yeah, that's the only shortcoming I see in this model. So what stands out for you in that model of Lencioni's? Just let me know what you think about that. What resonates for you?
Hey, so Laurel just asked her question.
Okay.
She asked, how do you manage true fun and enjoyment as a team versus those team members who have a great friendship but cannot truly work effectively?
Yeah, so there's 2 things in there. The great relationship but not work effectively is interesting because we'll see that more in what's on the curve as a potential team. And it's interesting that you use the word manage. We can probably talk about this after, but you actually can't manage fun. And this is one of the challenges of purposely creating or purposely setting out the conditions for a team to form, is that the team has to form, and the outputs and the ability to come together is really all about the team and how they're able to make that happen for themselves. You actually can't manage the fun, right? There's nothing you can do as a leader to say, have fun and have that work out. It just doesn't work that way. Good question, Laurel. Thank you.
Mark has said that he believes the pyramid should say conflict resolution rather than conflict.
Yeah, I totally agree, Mark. So in the book, I mean, and he puts a model out that way, but it's about constructive conflict, right? It's about, and I use the analogy of when I was building out the Rogers broadband network and I was leading the team to do the GTA, we had differing ideas, but what was great about being part of this real team was that we go into a room, we need to talk it out, close the door, put the blinds down, and it would literally be a war room, and we would each argue our point like very, very strongly. But in the end, because we were accountable to each other, because we were committed to the result, we walked out of there having had constructive conflict, real conflict, with an idea that we're all committed to and that we went ahead and implemented. And that was one of the best and strongest team efforts that I've ever been part of. So yeah, definitely constructive conflict is what that should say in that second level of that triangle. So right now I want to introduce the team performance curve. And some of you may have seen it in the group already. So the team performance curve looks like this. And the elements of the team performance curve, the first one I want to point out is that horizontal line between working group and potential team. And so what that suggests is that the performance impact of a working group can be about the same as the performance impact of a potential team. So a working group that's efficient and effective, sometimes those are, well, one great example is a leadership team where you've got a bunch of chiefs. So if you've got the chief operations officer and you've got the chief financial officer, they can work independently and come together, and you'll see in the definition of a working group, to just share information and support each other, but they're not a team. So here you'll see that the pseudo team, their performance impact is less than the working group and less than even the potential team, and we'll talk about that later. The relative distance between a potential team and a real team indicates the amount of work and effort it's going to take to move that potential team up the curve towards a real team. It's significant, and there's even more energy that's required to move a pseudo team up towards a real team. The relative distance between a real team and a high-performing team is less than potential to real, but there is the dashed line between the real team and the high-performing team. That's there because not every real team is able to make that or complete that journey towards being a high-performing team. And that there's a number of reasons for that, but some teams, some real teams stay there, which is still a high impact for the organization. So a working group. A working group doesn't necessarily have an imperative to provide significant performance improvement. So where you have that leadership team where each person has an area of their own responsibility and it's complete, as long as they're all committed to the goal of the organization and the business, then there's potentially no need for a team at that level, and a working group will suffice. So when they come together, they actually come together only to share information and perspectives and make decisions that might support one area or the other, or the business as a whole. One of the defining characteristics of a work group is that they all have different purposes. The technology person, the finance person, the operations person have different day-to-day purposes, and they're not common and they don't align. So the formation of a team at this point doesn't really make sense. And they also have no joint work products, which means that when they come together, each person isn't putting together, except for the business as a whole, pieces into something that they're going to deliver. There is no common work product or joint work product for a working group. And it doesn't require mutual accountability necessarily, not the kind that's shown and required in a real team. They are accountable to the business and to the board, but not necessarily to each other, which is a key defining characteristic of a real team. So a potential team, there is an opportunity to provide significant performance improvement and impact to the business. And it's even, potentially needed, and that's why that team was, the business attempted to pull that team together. So that potential team is attempting to improve the impact of their performance, but maybe not quite getting there, and that's what's keeping them as a potential team. They also aren't really crystal clear on why they're there. So why did they try and form a team, right? What is it that they're supposed to be doing? What are their goals? And they probably don't have those defined very clearly. And what do we deliver? Well, we do this, we do that, but the outputs of what they deliver to the rest of the business or their customers or clients isn't really clear, but they're getting there, right? They're working on it. How they do that, how they work together isn't well defined. People kind of have an idea of what the work process is, but it isn't well defined. It's not well known and well defined, and everybody knows their place in the value chain for what that team is pulling together. And here's where the collective accountability is not yet in place. So one of the defining factors of a team is that each team member, so not the leader, not the sponsor of the team, not the CEO, but each member of the team holds each other accountable for what they're doing. And that's not there yet in a potential team. So organizations have a ton of potential teams in their structure. And those are there, and they can be moved up to a real team, and we'll talk about that shortly. So a real team clearly addresses and is addressing a performance need in the organization. A real team is made up of a small number of people. So in our discussion yesterday, there was a person who worked with teams that they let get as high as 12 people. Now, I think that's a little big. And they did say that coordination and ability to bring everybody along at the same pace in a group of 12 is more difficult. So typically, teams are made up of between 6 to 9, maybe 10 people. 12 people is a stretch. The team members, when you're forming the team, you also form the team so that there's no gaps in skills. So each of the skills is complementary, skill sets is complementary, and they kind of butt up to each other and maybe slightly overlap, so there are no gaps in skills in the team. Every team member, and this is really important, every team member is equally committed to the common purpose that they've defined for the team. It can't be somebody that's partially committed, because that's going to get them to start sliding back down the curve towards a potential team. They've established very clear performance goals. So here's where it's interesting, because the organization will have told the team what the team needs to do, but inside the team, they then take what they have been asked to do by the organization and set some specific performance goals for themselves that, when accomplished, will have them deliver what the organization has asked them to. They sit down and define their working approach. And this, Mark, is what you had talked about earlier. And that working approach includes refining the working approach. And the way that they do that is all internal to the team. And their working approach, again, because they are a team and they're that unit, their working approach might be slightly different than the organization at large. And that's okay. That's what you expect out of a real team. And this one is one of the biggest ones. So yes, the leader is there, and we'll talk about the team leader probably next month in a new webinar, but the team hold themselves mutually accountable, and they trust each other, and they're committed. They're able to have conflict and talk about things, and that's what allows them to hold each other. Each member of a real team can hold any other member, and does hold any other member accountable for where they're going, what they're doing. So a high-performing team, that move up the curve from a real team to a high-performing team. A high-performing team has everything that a real team has, but over time and over the ability, or with the ability to trust at a higher level, they deepen their commitment to each other's growth. And this is really important, because sometimes people see a team as static and small as it is, but that there's no growth or change in there. But as the team grows, and as they attack the challenge that they've got, or deliver the results that they're delivering, there's room for growth for everybody on the team. And in truth, what you might want, and what you often see, is that people acquire skills that other people had when they came into the team. And now you've got what we call in sports depth in the team, so that the team can actually overlap. And that's part of the growth, is that they build skills that they didn't have when they came in. They also, over time, develop a deeper commitment to each other's successes. So they really share in, having been accountable and responsible and committed, they share in the successes that every member of the team has over time. And they have even more fun working hard as a high-performing team. And so this resonates for me, again, in that example at Rogers, where we were at a cottage for one weekend, and I pulled out my computer, and I didn't even give it a second thought. Like, I just had a couple of things I needed to do so that the team could continue to move forward. And my friends poked at me pretty well, because it was Saturday morning at the cottage, and I was doing emails. But what it pointed out to me was that I was working 70 to 80 and sometimes 90 hours a week, and loving it. Every morning I'd jump out of bed, couldn't wait to get to work, to continue with our mission of rolling out the Rogers broadband network. First one in Canada, we were rocking it, and we wanted to get it done. And so that for me was a fantastic experience of being part of a really high-performing team. So what level is your group working at now? If you have an idea of where you are and where your team is, Like, what do you think? What level is your team working at? Go ahead and share that with us if you're comfortable with that. Okay, while you guys are finishing that up, I'll just move ahead a bit. So, situational leadership is another model by another well-known author, Ken Blanchard. So Blanchard's model talks about the progression in terms of people's capabilities in the job and matching the right leadership style to that development state of individuals. So what I see is that in terms of situational leadership, team members who make up a real team are over to the left hand side, at a D4 level. They're highly competent and they're highly committed, in Blanchard's terms, to the group. And so notionally, you can see that a high performing team would have all of its members at a D4 level where they're, like I said, highly competent and highly committed. In this case, one of the neat things to understand and that Blanchard informs us on is that the leadership style, the style of the leader, if they've got a full team of D4s, has to be very different than the style of a leader who has a team full of D1s, right? People who are low in competence because they're brand new to the job, but they're highly committed, right? They're go-getters, but they really don't know what they're doing. So the leadership style for a real team has to be different. We'll talk about that in a webinar that I'll run in July, probably the first week of July. So what's less than the sum of its parts? I think you guys saw it at the beginning when we touched on the performance curve, a pseudo team. So unfortunately, there is a big opportunity, or a big opportunity may exist for a pseudo team to significantly increase performance, right? People in a pseudo team use the label of team. Oh yeah, I'm part of this team and it's great. However, they espouse teamwork, but they really don't work together. So there's no collective performance and there's no attempt to create a collective performance standard or goals. They have no interest in creating those common purposes or goals. And typically, you might hear them say, well, we're doing what we're told, right? This is what we're told to do, and this is what we're doing. So whereas a team, even a potential team, they're going to try and figure things out for themselves. Pseudo team is kind of hanging back and waiting to be told what to do. And in this case, the sum of the parts is less than the sum of the individuals, right? Or the output of the team. And that's a challenge because there are a significant number of pseudo teams and organizations. So there's confusion over why they're there, what their purpose is. They're unable to focus on the job at hand and really get to where they want to get to. A pseudo team, there tends to be finger pointing and personal, like overt personal animosity and individual ambition. So this one is one of the really clear defining ones for me, is that if you're part of a team and if you really want to work as a team, it's the team goals and the team outputs that are most important. You have to put your piece in, but with individual ambition in the way, that's going to really hurt the performance of the team. Hierarchical rituals. This is the way we've always done it, right? Those things you will hear in a pseudo team. There's no benefit and understanding and value for a team approach. And when things aren't going quite well, they fault each other, but especially you'll find people pointing fingers at the leader. So in a potential team, in a real team, that doesn't happen because everybody's mutually accountable and they're pulling together. So that's a bit of a challenge in a pseudo team, and part of the reason why their output is less than the sum of the individual parts. And pseudo teams are also widespread in organizations. How do you know where your group is on the curve? So that's an interesting question.
Can you stop there for 1 sec?
Yep, for sure.
Laurel has just said that she thinks that her team is a real team, but that they can get to a high performance team.
Awesome. Yeah, and as they spend more time together, Laura would look forward to hearing how that goes, but definitely people can look forward to seeing that team move up that curve to be a high-performing team. That's cool. So, is your group a real team? So the team basics that we've gone through kind of give you a checklist in terms of what that might look like. So the team would have to be small enough to be a team and not a large department of 20 people. The complementary skills so that you have the sense that everything the team needs to do is covered and there aren't any gaps. The team's able to generate a truly meaningful purpose. They have specific goals, and how they get their work done is very clear to everybody in there. And you can sense that they're mutually accountable, and you can sense that they know what each other is doing and will hold each other accountable when they need to. Some of the additional considerations is, you'll hear people talk about who they are. They might have a name for the team. They might have a saying or a slogan. They've probably been together long enough at that point where they have developed a theme for themselves. Also, when you get into the team and you look around, there's a ton of energy and enthusiasm for the work itself, right? So not just the social aspect, but there's a ton of energy and enthusiasm for the work itself. This one is really important. And so as in leadership, sometimes there's an article that talks about being fired in a crucible. So a crucible is a ceramic device that you put material in, and that goes into a furnace at 2,500 degrees. And what comes out after being in there for a certain amount of time is the core elements of whatever you put in there. And so if a team or a leader, which is what this article talks about, is fired in a crucible through some difficult events in their history, and the team comes out intact, that's really powerful because they've been, through that event, grown together, and a team that comes through that intact will be powerful indeed. So you notice that the members show an open commitment to each other and to the goals and to the purpose of the team. And regularly they perform at or above expectations. And that's that going above and beyond that we talked about before and having fun while doing it. So what's involved in moving up the curve? So if we're moving up the curve, there's a bunch of risks that are involved. And I often stop here for a second, just ask folks, if you're moving from a potential team or a pseudo team up to being a real team where you've got that ability to have constructive conflict, where you're interdependent, where you are committed to the team goals above your own, what's risky about that? So while you guys collect your thoughts and enter it into the chat, I'll kind of move ahead. This might be giving away some of it, but let's go ahead anyways. So personal exposure, right? So yesterday in yesterday's webinar, we talked about vulnerability. So to build that trust and put yourself out there, there's some personal exposure. So that's a risk. Career disadvantages. People believe, or there are beliefs sometimes, that being sequestered away in a team is a disadvantage because you're no longer that individualistic superstar that people can point out. You're part of a team that's doing it. But in effect, if the team rises and the team gets what they need to get done, your career will probably move ahead at equally as fast, if not faster. Business as usual is a risk. So earlier I had mentioned just quickly about a culture of performance. If the team is trying to do something, but all around the team is business as usual, that's a risk for the team forming properly and being able to move up the curve to be a real team and to deliver the challenge that they've been tasked with. Constructive conflict. Yeah, so we've talked about that a lot today. So the ability to have constructive conflict, if it's not there, then that's going to be difficult for the team to form and move forward. Interdependence, again, from that vulnerability and trust and commitment to each other. So moving up the curve, some of the approaches to moving up the curve include establishing urgency for a potential team, right? Find a bearing and a direction. Selecting the right skills and team members with those skills and potential to deliver and learn additional skills because the team grows over time. This one for me is important, and unfortunately I've seen it kind of mishandled a number of times in organizations. When you've chartered a new team and you're getting that team started, and the next step for them is really sitting down to pull their purpose together and set their goals. That very first meeting where either the team leader handles the meeting or the sponsor and plus the team leader handle the meeting, there is no better time, no more important time for the sponsor and the team leader to show up in the way that they want that team to work. Showing up and talking about teamwork and being business as usual is a missed opportunity in terms of starting a team, moving up that curve from potential team to real team. Co-creating clear rules and expected behaviors. So when the team forms, really right off the bat, the team leader needs to get the team together, and co-create is kind of an approach that we use in coaching where you sit down and do it together. It's not the team leader telling everybody, because that's not a team, that's a hierarchical department, but it's getting that created clearly at the beginning together.
So Mark has just said one of his risks that he thinks, saying that other team members consist commitment to the team and the same vision or goal.
Yeah, totally. And if people are in there without that commitment and different visions, yeah, it'll be really, really hard to move up the curve. And that's kind of the business as usual, but it's also not sitting down and co-creating it together. So thanks, Mark. Thanks for that. Absolutely correct, in my opinion. So set and take on a few actions and performance goals right away. So there is no waiting. The team is together. Co-create those. Get started. Get moving. Start building those team dynamics that will carry the team forward. Challenge the group to learn so that they build additional skills and capabilities. Spend lots of time together. So this is one of the challenges that has been mentioned before to me, is that, you know, how much time does it take? Well, it takes time. It takes time for the team to be together, to gel, to grow. And so spending time together is really important. And then even though the team is made up potentially of all D4 members, according to the situational leadership model, they still need positive feedback, reinforcement, and recognition. So that's important for the team leader to recognize and make sure that they manage, but also for the other team leaders to recognize and reward and support each other. So in summary, teams are formed around performance goals. They're supported by a performance culture in the organization. So trying to create a team in an organization that doesn't value performance, that's going to be a bit of a challenge. There are 7 main factors that define a real team, and that's their size, their skills, and that the skills are complementary, their commitment, a clear purpose, clear goals, a co-created approach to doing the work, and mutual accountability. There are also 7 factors that kind of define why a potential team is a potential team, and indicate some of what they need to do to move up that curve to be a real team. And so the things that keep a potential team where it is that need for improved performance, which isn't quite there yet. That they need to clarify and be really concrete on why they're there, their purpose, and that they set clear and specific goals for each other. That they need to better define their approach to how they do their work, and they need to grow, support, and build that mutual accountability. And that we just finished, there are about 8 things that you can do to help a potential team move up the curve. So next steps. This recorded webinar will go to the cloud, and I'll post it in the group for everybody to look at again and to share again with the group, so that we do create that learning opportunity. I'd love for you to share into the group the things that you've learned today, your thoughts about the webinar, your thoughts about any of the topics in the webinar, again, to support that learning by people in the group. And if any questions come out of what I've talked about today, please ask them in the group again so that we can create learning opportunities for folks. The next webinar, like I said, I think will be the week of July 6th. I'll see if I can do 5 of them again to get more people in. But it'll be about the team leader, and it'll be about those qualities that the team leader needs to have in order to support and build the team. So that will be really important in July. And then I just want to say thank you. So thanks for being here, and thanks for your time. I appreciate it on a Friday in almost summertime. You guys taking, 3/4 of an hour out of your day to be here with me. So thanks again. I'll stop the share now and end the webinar for everybody. Thanks, everybody. Have a great Friday and a great weekend. Bye.